And we see it in our workshop when we do that, developing the value proposition. Everybody has something different. When they ask you, what does your company do? And everybody says something different.
Hi, today we are thrilled to have Robert Kinch to the Why Involve podcast. Robert is the co-founder of Get More Sales, a leading fractional sales company that helps businesses accelerate their sales growth. He is also the co-author of the very insightful book, Sales Made Easy for Entrepreneurs, where he shares invaluable tips for navigating the sales landscape. With over 3 decades of experience in sales strategy, Robert has been guiding entrepreneurs and organizations on more effective selling techniques. Robert, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rakesh. That was great.
Robert, it's great to have you on this forum. We have worked with you for over a year. You and your team have been providing fractional sales services to us in the North American region, and we are seeing significant success in that relationship. A lot of things are evolving for us in that market. We are practically entering into new segments based on what your team is able to connect to us, and they are able to open doors for us that we were not privileged to earlier. And riding on that success, during our interactions, we also heard from you. And later on, I happened to read what you have written. You have authored a book called Sales Made Easy for Entrepreneurs. And that was quite an interesting read. And when I went through it, that was quite insightful. And what I got out of it is that it's not only preaching, but it is practically implementable. So there are a lot of takeaways, and I actually could see a lot of those things being put in practice in our working relationship. So Why Technologies and Get More Sales, implementing those things actually, and seeing success in the markets that are opening up for us. So what I want to do today is take some of your mind share to talk us through the book, having read it, understood it, and practically seen the implementation of what you have authored and recommend. I would like to open up a few open this up by asking you a few questions about the book, so
Sure.
that you can share your insights for the larger forum, right? So the first question naturally is that what's your inspiration? What's your inspiration behind writing this book?
Oh, well, that's great. Well, thanks, Rakesh. It's been a pleasure working with the team at Y. You guys have an amazing solution, and that makes it a little easier, especially the way we approach the market. So, from a perspective of writing the book, that actually it came from basically Frank and I, my business partner, who's co-authored the book. Basically, we spent many years in traditional big company sales, and in that environment, they do a lot of training for you. So you get a lot of this specialty training for sales, and there's techniques and there's things to name a few: solution selling, spin selling. There's all these different techniques that they advise you, they teach you about. And we really were looking at all that, and we said, how does anybody that's got a medium business or an entrepreneur that's starting up, how are they ever going to understand this? And we really thought, if we can figure out how to just simplify this, and we actually realized as we put that thought, is that that's actually what we were doing with our method, with our approach to sales. It was just really taking all this complexity and just simplifying it. And that's really how we came up with the methodology and the title of the book, Sales Made Easy, because really we consolidated everything down to sales is simply a successful conversation. And that's really all it should be, because people are people have interactions, and people have conversations all the time. The question is, are you having a conversation that is strategic, does it lead to a goal? And that's really what we ended up kind of writing the book. I did it in literally a month. I wrote it in a month.
Oh, okay. So. All right. No, it doesn't seem like that you did it in a month. It seems like that you okay, you probably did it in a month, but I think you poured your practical experience in it. So I think we all at YE are syncing with it. We are finding that, as I said, finding the practical implementation part of it really, really interesting. So rather than just reading something and leaving it there, we are finding inspiration to actually work with you to implement those things, right? And of course, the other work relationship is actually putting us up to those kind of tasks that you are ensuring that we do, and try and build more conversations with prospects and building relationships. One of the unique things in the book that I noticed, and you also spoke to us about it during our initial conversations before we started our engagement, and I think that kind of resonated with all of us at YE, and I believe that it will resonate with everyone, is that you really, really emphasize on not mere product selling and survival, but you emphasize on actually selling value and thriving, right? So, and I think the way you have articulated that in the book, as well as the practical experience that we get even in our interactions with conversations with prospects, we see that coming out. I would like you to elaborate that on a bit, please, for the sake of this work.
Yeah, sure. The premise of the book is sell your value and not your product, right? Because a lot of times what happens is that we found with the entrepreneurs that we work with, they create their baby, so to speak, right? They create this beautiful thing that they believe it's beautiful. The baby's beautiful, but when you take and start talking to people about this beautiful baby, some people are going, well, I don't think that baby's that pretty. It's not so good looking, right? So and some of them may even say, well, that's kind of ugly. And so really, that's what we call pitching your product. You've got this idea, this solution, and you're pitching it to people, and they start to feel like you're really selling them, right? And that's when you get that. I think we talk about it in the book, the slimy used car sales feeling, right? And really selling value is really the true reason why people buy your solution. They buy your solution because of the value it delivers to their business, to themselves. And that's really why they're buying. So you have to start there. And that's really where the power of the whole sales conversation comes from. Because if you're focused on the value you deliver, what you're doing is you're taking yourself out of your own bias, your own solution bias, and you're stepping into the customer and trying to understand what would they find valuable, and what is it that you're bringing to them that causes them to say, yeah, this is something I'm interested in or I'm curious about, because it's that value that starts everything. And that value structured properly, which we worked with you, Rakesh, on we always start with a session on defining the value, helping our customers identify what is that value message, what is that customer really interested in. And when you do it properly, you start to create engagement, you create curiosity with the customer and the prospect, and that causes them to engage you instead of you engaging them or pitching to them. So.
Okay, that's interesting. And we have, of course, it's not only interesting, but practically experienced by us. And I think some of those initial sessions with your team, you yourself and team, were really eye-opening for us. We were also not envisaging the way our services or products were being offered in the market. And I think when it came to the value proposition or deriving the true value that will resonate in the market, I think those kind of workshops made a lot of sense, because we started questioning ourselves internally to bring out the true value that we actually deliver to our prospect or clients, right? And that was really, really insightful. Having said that, it's always a journey, right? It's not you're not just turning a key one day and everything transforms. So it's a journey. Obviously with your years of, with your experience, you have rather dealt with and provided services to many organizations like us, mid-sized to small-size organizations, which are wanting to grow. What do you see as the most common, for lack of a better word, mistakes that you see new or even seasoned entrepreneurs making when they want to actually grow their business?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of times it comes down to you have to slow down to speed up. And a lot of times we see people start just doing tactics into the market, and they haven't really stopped, take a breath to create a strategy before you go. And it applies to everything in the selling conversation. For example, the reason that we start with value is because it starts to allow us to craft a vision of what might be interesting to a customer, so that even you're preparing for a conversation. But we see a lot of our customers, our clients, they've been doing these tactical things. They'll do some ads here, or they'll attend an event, and it's not even relevant to what their clients want, just because they think they should be there. So it's really slowing down and building out that strategic effort, which is a selling effort. And I think we all do it. It's just we kind of forget that you do it for your business, you do it for your product development. You don't just haphazardly design and add things to your product. But when it comes to sales, people don't realize that sales is a profession. I call it a profession of probabilities. So you have to plan and strategically approach it, just the same way you would your other areas of your business. And I think it gets kind of left behind that way. And so that would be the one thing: slow down to speed up, which is crucial.
Understood. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, because even something that I would like to narrate some experiences here, because what we also experienced is that it was service after service, product after product, new idea one after another, and you are constantly trying to throw things in the market, hoping that somebody will catch the ball and be interested. But I think when we started strategizing, really thinking around value proposition and positioning the value of every product in a very unique way, that made a lot of difference. And I think I'm resonating with what you're saying, because again, I'm correlating that to the practical experience that we had, and that was really good. Now I'm kind of moving off not just focused on the book, but you are the co-founder of Get More Sales, which is a fractional sales service provider, if I may say that.
Yeah.
And we avail your services. Obviously, we have had an engagement for close to a year now and seeing success. Why do you think that this model works? One, why does this model work, fractional sales model work? And what type of organizations should look at fractional sales as a model?
Yeah, I think it works because it's more cash flow sensitive to an early stage business. Ideally, from our perspective, we believe our value is most urgent with that owner-led entrepreneur, where they've been doing all the sales and they've been driving a lot of the revenue, and they're kind of spending a lot of time in their business, not working on their business. And they're finding, when you get into it, you actually find that it is a profession. You kind of can't just randomly do it. You need to follow some process, some science. And we have a saying that sales is 80% science, 20% art, and the art is knowing when to apply the science.
Yep. That's
and right. And so we find that, and so they're kind of in that environment. And so when we come in with a fractional model, we're able to provide that senior experienced sales individual, surround them with business development, because most of our clients are looking to grow their market, and then we share them fractionally, because you take someone that's got, well, let me step back. The power of, I see this happen a lot. Entrepreneurs, they hire a salesperson, they're thinking about it. So they're thinking about hiring a salesperson. And effectively, what they do is they hire someone based on their product knowledge. And if you think about selling your value, not your product, that's really doing it backwards. And so what you really want is someone that understands the business that you're selling to, and so can position the value and understand that level of conversation. And that's why having a senior individual, someone that's been there, done that, like all our team, 30 plus years of selling experience, but they've been in that C-suite, that decision maker on level, so they understand P&L, they understand, the cost of sale, they understand the cost of development. So when you're having that level of conversation, you're more relatable to the client, the customer that you're talking to. And that's where your questions come around. And so bringing that senior skill helps them be more successful. And basically we do it fractionally, meaning you share someone across multiple clients, and that way you take that senior skill and you drop the cost. So we'd like to say it's a cash flow alternative, a cash flow sensitive alternative to hiring somebody full time, and that's why I think it works.
One more thing, I'm again iterating back into your book, and not only your book, but also our conversations. And I remember the very first conversation that we had with you, where you quoted your book, but also said that everybody is selling all the time, right? And and that kind of for us, it was a very different story. I mean, we believe that we are delivering all the time, but not selling all the time. And then when we started connecting the dots, we realized that every opportunity to converse with the client, and whosoever in the organization it may be, but there is always an opportunity, whether you are doing a direct sale or whether you are doing a built up to an opportunity. So I would like to hear from you. I mean, you said it, you have shown the practical implementation of it, but for the larger forum, what's your take on this? I mean, how do you see this developing as a technique?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Oh, I guess I did say that. All right. But basically, that's the power of the value, starting with the value proposition, because one of the things that we found, and we see it in our workshop when we do that, developing the value proposition, everybody has something different. When they ask you, what does your company do? And everybody says something different, right? And it's really, that's a challenge, because everybody should say the same thing. And the power of developing that value and understanding what it is that you truly deliver to your customers, it gives a commonality across the organization and makes it easy. So anybody in the organization, it should be saying the same thing. So if it's your senior project manager on a specific development project, and they're in an elevator and somebody says, well, what do you guys do at Y? They should be saying the value, that statement. And what it does, it gets alignment. So it makes it easy for everyone, because what happens is when you say it properly, somebody that's really interested or has the problem, even though they're talking to the project manager, will go, well, how do you guys do that? And now they're curious. And I say, well, let's talk, right? So everybody, it enables everyone to sell, because they're speaking from the same playbook.
The next question is, we have already spoken about the mindset of an entrepreneur. However, being an entrepreneur, I would say, in my experience at least, that happens in phases. So there is a phase 0 of being an entrepreneur, then there is a mid-level phase, and then there is a advanced phase. Does the approach towards selling value, does that change over these phases, or does it remain consistent? How do you look at it?
I would say it pretty much stays consistent. So if you truly have figured out your value, what that should actually lead to your shifting. Now having said that, sometimes you do pivot, like we've seen entrepreneurs where you literally pivot, right? And if you've created a solution that's addressing some value in the marketplace, that we've seen, sometimes you got to pivot because you're realizing that the value you're addressing isn't urgent. It's not an urgent thing that you're trying to address, because we talk about it in the book. Urgency is crucial to the value, and you can have great value, but people are like, meh, maybe it's great. We do kind of need that, but you really want to have urgency if you want to drive growth, and I think, in most business school, most startup schools, they talk about that, being able to pivot, because if you're really banging your head against the wall and the value isn't quite there, that's triggering that curiosity, that urgency, then that's where it might change, right? Might change because you realize that it's not quite that what the market needs. But again, it all starts with stepping out of what you're building and moving into where that client are. Do they really value that, right? And we've never created software, but I believe that's a lot of the advice that they give you when you're building solutions for the marketplace, right?
That's right. Yep, that's right. I'm again iterating back to your book, and probably you addressed the question that I'm going to ask earlier, okay, but I would like you to kind of detail it out a bit.
Sure.
We spoke about mere survival and the transitioning to thriving. So, rather than focusing on survival, focus on thriving. And obviously, the answer to that was correlated to selling values and not just products. But from a strategy perspective, how does an entrepreneur or an organization adapt to this change?
Yeah, I think it's you're looking at how can you scale your sales organization. So we don't just look at once you have the value, you're addressing an urgent need in the marketplace. That's step one. But then you have to have a process around your selling efforts. It can't be random, and we talk about a sales process in the book, and knowing the next step, because that has to be able to be duplicated as you grow. So for example, if you're in a fractional sales model, you start out that way, you start to see the sales coming in and the steps we go through, you're ready to bring on a full-time salesperson. You now have to have them know exactly what to do. So you have to be able to duplicate that effort. And really that's where the scaling comes from, and having process. So it's sales is a process, and you really, and like I mentioned earlier, it's a science. And so you have to understand that process and systematize that into your organization so that you can duplicate the skills you need, right? You have to duplicate that selling effort with each person that you hire. You don't want to have it all just be one-off. It makes it very hard to kind of grow that way. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, it does. And actually, it actually puts a lot of logic behind some of the actions that you are asking us to do, like collaboratively creating a sales playbook, something that is consistent across the organization. So it becomes repetitive and it becomes second nature, within the organization. And yes, when you talk about it, when you explained it in a way, it makes a lot of sense as to why that is required. So thank you very much. The next question is, you earlier touched upon the topic. We spoke about conversations, and we also spoke about relationships, right? And you mentioned that sales is all about building and maintaining relationships. So could you kind of elaborate and emphasize on that a bit, please?
Yeah, sure. So the power of doing this properly is that you do create long-term relationships, because the mindset in Sales Made Easy and selling your value and not pitching your product is that if I can't help the customer, and there's no way for me to do it, I won't. Right? I'll tell you if we can't help you. And what that does to the customer is they go, oh, okay. And usually we would say something like, well, you know what, based on our conversation, because we're asking them we've positioned the value, we're asking them about their business, trying to identify if there's some need there. We're focused on them, and it gives us a lot of insight. And then if we say, I don't think we can help you, but in the future, are you okay if we reach out if we have something that fits? That's hugely powerful with a customer and creating that relationship. And it also, that's with someone that you may not have been able to help, but by focusing on their business and the value, you're really creating a true partnership with your customers, because you're understanding what their business is all about. It forces you to learn about their business and not just focus on the technology you're putting in their business, right? And because of that, you start to elevate your level of partnership with them, because they start to now come to you as more of an advisor. Hey Rakesh, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? Right? And now you're really in that synergistic relationship with the customer. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, understood. And that's like the actual practical experience that we get when we adapt that strategy. Or I think eventually it becomes, as you practice it, it becomes the organization's natural behavior, right? To be objective, assertive, and truthful. And use that to, leverage that to build the relationship, right? So, and the prospect or the customer will come back. That's thank you for that. This is probably the last question that I have, and then, we can extend this conversation based on what you feel like talking about.
Sure.
But in the current age where we are dealing with prospects and customers, more digitally, right? It's not, these are not face-to-face interactions, these are digital interactions. Do you see any specific strategies or tactics that one must, or an organization must adapt to overcome any challenges which are posed because the interaction is not face-to-face or personal?
Yeah, I will say the one thing, I always say that the global situation we had a few years ago was both a curse and a blessing, because from a digital perspective, what it did was it shifted people's mindset, especially the executives and companies' mindset, where what we're doing here, this digital podcast, this digital interaction, we can do this now, where you can be in one place and have a video call with a senior executive somewhere else. And they actually prefer that interaction because it's more time efficient. It's more effective to them. It lets them kind of address things quickly, and there's no travel. And I think people are enjoying the fact that they don't have to fly all over the place to meet. Not to mention people's teams now are all remote. So it's very hard to meet someone somewhere because a lot of them aren't even in the office. And so that's one aspect of it. But when you do it this way, one thing that I find that you have to be very cognizant of the fact that you don't have that in-person interaction. So you have to be very, you have to listen better. It requires better listening skills, and you can see the people, but you've got to understand that. I'll give you a simple technique. For example, I'm talking to you right now. I know you're on my screen, but I'm looking at the camera, right? So that's because that's where the people are that you're talking to. So I think just you have to change your approach a little bit to be more relatable, so that you're being effective. So and I think that's just some of the aspects, but it does allow us to reach out into different places now, right? Like, for example, our company's based in Canada, but we help our clients right across North America, and so it's really changed things, but it hasn't, because sales is still simply a conversation. And if you're asking questions and the questions you ask the customer, even if it's a digital video environment, you still have to ask questions that create credibility, show you know what you're doing, etc. So it's still a conversation. You still have to have those skills. You can't just pitch your product.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And while I said that my earlier question was the last question, but I forgot to ask. I kind of missed one more, and the one, this one probably is more going to be. I would ask you to summarize your book in maybe a gist by asking you this question: that for someone who is starting out on the entrepreneurial journey, what is your advice towards revenue or business growth and sales?
Yeah, I would say slow down to speed up. Start with your value. Do an exercise where you truly understand the value you're developing, you're providing to your customer, and then allow that customer focus to drive how you're delivering your solution to the marketplace. And I think a lot of times we get so, and I'm talking about more of a software provider here, because I think mostly today technology companies are delivering that solution. You get so engaged with what you're developing that you're forgetting that somebody's got to buy it, right? And if you're building stuff that people just don't want to buy, then you're just burning cash.
Yep.
Right? And you don't want to do that. So.
We were on that journey a couple of years ago, and I know what you're saying, and I think we learned it the hard way. And but I think what you're saying is making a lot of sense. And the message out to young entrepreneurs and somebody who's starting new is, maintain the pace, take it easy, take it slow, focus on the value, and take the value to the market. I think that's these are the core mantras that I think Robert has been talking about. So Robert, from a questions perspective, that's it from me.
That's great.
Do you want to leave us with any message?
Yeah, I just think one, I want to say thanks for giving me the opportunity to just help you with your podcast. I think it's a great initiative, and I think it really surrounds wise value to the market. It's another way you provide value to your customers, because I know we, even when we're talking as part of the sales engagement, it gives us another alternative. So if somebody's not ready today, we now have a way to say, hey, by the way, I think you could really deliver some value to them with your knowledge. Would you mind joining our podcast? So I think it's a great tool to help us even in the sales environment, and it really it adds that value to the end user. And it's an interesting way to deliver value, because I think it's unique. People don't think about, what if we've got a podcast, because it's kind of not engaging. It's not part of the product or anything like that. It's just this subtle, hey, let's talk. And I think it's a great tool to do that, So
it's a great tool.
Keep doing it.
So certainly, and we'll keep inviting you over and over, talking about new topics, developments that happen at your side, and we'll keep you posted what's happening on our side too. So, Robert, thank you very much for joining this podcast and making it very, very interesting. I'm sure everybody who is going to be watching it is going to find a lot of interesting and practically implementable advice. And I would strongly recommend your book to everyone. Have a read through. And once again, Robert, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Rakesh. I enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure.
Yep. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you.